The air in the French court was thick with candle smoke and whispered conspiracies. The corridors of the Louvre, with their cold marble floors and gilded walls, echoed with footsteps that never led to peace, only to schemes. Here, power was not given. It was seized, manipulated, and often poisoned. And at the heart of this labyrinth of intrigue stood a woman whose name would be feared for centuries, Catherine de' Medici. Born in 1519 in Florence, Catherine was the daughter of Lorenzo II de' Medici and Madeleine de la Tour d'Auvergne, a child of noble lineage but precarious position. Florence, a city of art, wealth, and ruthless politics, had taught her early that beauty, intelligence, and alliances were tools in the game of survival. But Florence was small, and her destiny was far larger. She would cross the Alps to the court of France, where she would become queen, mother of kings, and architect of terror cloaked in elegance. Catherine arrived in France at the tender age of 14 to marry Henry, the second son of King Francis II. The union was strategic, a political chess move orchestrated by families who measured power like gold. Henry was shy and weak, a boy ill-prepared for the machinations of a royal court. Catherine, by contrast, was vigilant, calculating, a mind sharpened on the edges of betrayal and necessity. She observed, recorded, and remembered every slight, every smile, every glance that could be turned into leverage. Soon after her arrival, the court's grandeur became a cage. France was not Florence, and its people did not forgive weakness. Her early years were marked by isolation, her husband's indifference, and the constant scrutiny of nobles who viewed her as an outsider. Yet Catherine learned to wield the one weapon she had in abundance: patience. She smiled when insulted, bowed when cornered, and retreated only to strike later. By the time she bore her first son, the future Francis II, Catherine had already begun stitching the threads of influence that would one day bind France itself. But motherhood did not soften her, it sharpened her. She understood that her children were not mere heirs. They were keys, each capable of unlocking the throne or destroying it entirely. Her approach to motherhood was intertwined with strategy, as every birth, every alliance through marriage became a move in the endless game of power. The court watched as she transformed from a timid girl into a queen whose presence demanded attention, whose silence could terrify, and whose smile often concealed a hidden dagger. The world outside the palace walls was no less perilous. France was fractured, its people divided along the lines of religion. The Protestant Reformation had ignited tensions that threatened to engulf the nation. The Catholic crown feared rebellion. The Huguenots feared annihilation. Catherine's role in this storm would define her legacy, but her methods were already taking shape in the shadows. Diplomacy, persuasion, and, when necessary, poison became instruments of her rule. She understood that the line between survival and death in the court was thinner than a hair, and she would walk it with meticulous care. Catherine's reputation as a patron of the arts belied the darker truths of her reign. Her gardens, festivals, and spectacles were not only displays of taste, they were tools of distraction, masking the relentless maneuvering that occurred behind closed doors. Every banquet, every mask, every sumptuous gown served a purpose: to observe, to influence, and occasionally to eliminate threats discreetly. Poison was her instrument of choice, its use subtle, its effect invisible, its danger cloaked in the very luxury she orchestrated. The court of Catherine de' Medici became synonymous with fear, suspicion, and intrigue. Courtiers learned to guard their goblets and meals, to watch allies as closely as rivals, and to trust only the silence of their own thoughts. Stories of sudden deaths, illnesses, and mysterious disappearances began to circulate, and whispers always returned to Catherine. Was she the mastermind behind these tragedies? Did she poison her enemies with cold precision, or were these merely rumors amplified by fear? The truth, as often in history, lay in the shadows, entwined with her careful hand. Her most notorious episode, which would cement her reputation as the Black Queen of France, began with the political marriages she orchestrated for her children. Each union was a calculated move, designed to balance power between warring factions, yet often sowing seeds of resentment. The marriage of her daughter Marguerite to Henry of Navarre, a Protestant, was meant to quell religious strife, but instead it ignited the tinder of hatred that would lead to the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. Catherine, by then, had learned to anticipate every reaction, every betrayal of trust. She understood the volatile hearts of men, and she exploited them with precision. The night of the massacre, Paris was a city of tension, its streets filled with fear and rumor. Catherine's court had long whispered of the dangers posed by Protestant leaders, and the Queen Mother made her decision. Her influence over her sons, the young King Charles and Dauphine in particular, was absolute. Her counsel was both revered and feared. Under her guidance, a plan was enacted that would alter French history. The city, under the cover of darkness, became a stage for carnage. Nobles loyal to the Huguenot cause were hunted, killed, and thrown into the Seine. Their families were not spared. The massacre spread beyond Paris to the provinces, leaving a trail of blood and terror that would haunt the nation for generations. Yet Catherine was not merely a figure of cruelty. She was, paradoxically, a strategist of survival. Every act of violence she sanctioned was a measure of control, a means to protect her children and secure the monarchy. The court and the country were dangerous, unpredictable, and she would not allow them to dictate her fate. Her enemies, both real and perceived, became instruments through which she exercised authority. The line between morality and expediency blurred, leaving only results, the survival and dominance of her house. Catherine's reliance on poison was both symbolic and practical. The alchemists and apothecaries she employed were skilled in crafting substances that could end lives discreetly. Rumors claimed that she carried small vials of these poisons in her sleeves, ready to deploy against those who threatened her ambitions. Whether these tales were truth or legend, they contributed to the aura of fear surrounding her. Her contemporaries spoke of her as a woman whose beauty masked a calculating mind, a mind capable of orchestrating deaths as casually as others might plan a ball. Despite the darkness of her actions, Catherine's intellect and cultural patronage were undeniable. She invited artists, scholars, and thinkers into her court, fostering an environment of creativity and knowledge. But even these gestures were not purely benevolent. They were tools to maintain influence, to distract, and to impress allies and enemies alike. Her understanding of human psychology was profound. She knew that fear, fascination, and admiration could all be wielded as weapons. She was not content to simply survive. She sought to dominate, to shape the perceptions and loyalties of those around her. Her manipulation of court politics extended to her children as well. Each of her sons, Francis II, Charles IX, and Henry III, was subjected to her guidance, her counsel, and occasionally her coercion. She steered their decisions, shaped their alliances, and, when necessary, encouraged ruthlessness. Her influence was total, yet it came at a personal cost. Catherine's health was frail, her body often burdened by pregnancies and illness, but her mind remained sharp, her determination unyielding. She was both revered and feared, a mother, a queen, and an architect of terror. As France entered periods of instability, Catherine's strategies became more intricate. She brokered alliances, negotiated truces, and manipulated rival factions with the deftness of a master chess player. Yet every success came with its shadows, betrayals, murders, and whispers of poison. The court became a theater in which appearances were paramount, but the true battles were invisible, fought in whispers, glances, and concealed vials. Catherine thrived in this world where subtlety equaled survival and discretion equaled power. Her role in the wars of religion solidified her reputation as both protector and destroyer. Huguenot leaders, often invited to the court under the guise of diplomacy, were met with suspicion, surveillance, and in some cases, death. The balance of power shifted constantly, and Catherine's interventions were decisive. Yet she was never seen as merely cruel. She was seen as necessary, as a force that preserved the monarchy in a time when it could easily have been shattered. Her decisions were calculated, her methods often ruthless, and her results undeniable. Amidst this darkness, Catherine's personal life remained constrained. Her marriage to Henry II, though initially a source of security, was marked by infidelity, particularly his long-standing affair with Diane de Poitiers. Catherine endured these humiliations, outwardly restrained, inwardly meticulous in plotting her influence. When Henry died unexpectedly in 1559, the Queen's restraint turned into calculated authority. She navigated the dangerous waters of regency for her young son, Charles IX, employing all her cunning to maintain control over a fractious and often hostile court. The regency was a test of Catherine's abilities, a period in which she transformed from a queen consort to a queen mother whose influence was absolute. Her enemies, both domestic and foreign, were aware that she could orchestrate disaster as easily as she could craft an alliance. Her reputation for ruthlessness grew, as did her reliance on subtle acts of terror. Courtiers learned that survival required obedience, and even loyalty was measured by how well one anticipated the Queen Mother's intentions. In this turbulent period, Catherine also cultivated knowledge of poisons and assassination techniques, reportedly keeping a library of deadly substances and methods. Whether she personally administered them or merely oversaw their use, the perception of her mastery over death reinforced her power. The court whispered of secret deaths, strange illnesses, and sudden disappearances, all attributed to her unseen hand. Catherine understood the power of fear as a tool. It could be as effective as an army or a treaty, and often more precise. As the years progressed, Catherine's children grew into their roles as monarchs, yet she remained the shadow behind the throne. Her influence extended into matters of state, marriage, and military strategy. She negotiated treaties with careful precision, manipulated rival nobles, and intervened decisively in disputes that could threaten the stability of France. Her court became a crucible of power, intellect, and fear, and Catherine herself was the fire at its center, warming some, burning others, leaving all aware of her omnipresence. Even as her reputation darkened, Catherine's intellect and cunning could not be denied. She understood that history remembered not only deeds but perception, and she carefully curated both. The arts, festivals, and opulent spectacles were not mere indulgences. They were instruments of influence, shaping opinion and masking the more ruthless aspects of her rule. Catherine de' Medici became both legend and cautionary tale, a woman of unmatched intelligence, capable of beauty, cruelty, and strategy, whose life would forever define the interplay between power and terror in the French court. And yet, despite all her schemes, all her planning, Catherine remained human. She faced the challenges of illness, betrayal, and grief, even as she orchestrated events that shaped a nation. Her life was a paradox, simultaneously tender and terrifying, devoted and ruthless, celebrated and reviled. She would go on to live long enough to see the consequences of her actions unfold, witnessing both triumph and tragedy, while the shadow of her influence lingered over France, a dark testament to her vision, her fearlessness, and her unyielding will. By the end of this period, Catherine de' Medici had established herself as a figure both feared and respected, a queen who navigated the treacherous waters of politics, religion, and family with unmatched skill. Her legacy, however, would be defined not merely by survival, but by the indelible mark she left on history, a legacy of power, poison, and unflinching ambition. The court awaited her next moves with a mixture of awe and dread. Every banquet, every meeting, every letter could conceal a trap, a secret, or a death sentence. And in this world of shadows and whispers, Catherine reigned supreme, her mind as sharp as any blade, her presence as commanding as any army. The first chapter of Catherine de' Medici's dark history closes not with an end, but with anticipation. The seeds of future tragedies have been sown, the mechanisms of fear perfected, and the legend of the Black Queen firmly rooted in the heart of France. Catherine de' Medici's later years unfolded like a dark symphony, each note measured, deliberate, and chillingly beautiful. By the 1570s, France was a nation fractured by religion, its landscape scarred by war, its people weary, and its monarchy weakened by internal divisions. Yet, Catherine, the Black Queen of the French court, remained a force of calculation, observation, and ruthless authority. Her power was no longer merely inherited through marriage. It had become a carefully constructed dominion of her own making. The defining moment of her legacy had already begun years earlier, with the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in 1572. The memory of that night still haunted the streets of Paris. Thousands of Huguenots, including nobles and merchants, had been slaughtered in a wave of orchestrated violence, a bloody tide that swept through the city under Catherine's watchful eyes. The massacre was more than an act of vengeance. It was a calculated political maneuver. Catherine understood the dangers posed by Protestant leaders. She knew that compromise could only be temporary, and she would not allow their influence to threaten the fragile balance of her family's rule. The planning of the massacre was meticulous. Every target, every house, every potential threat was accounted for. Courtiers loyal to Catherine and the crown were given instructions in hushed tones, and assassination plots were executed with surgical precision. The night erupted in chaos, yet within that chaos lay order dictated by the Queen Mother. Her influence over her son, King Charles IX, was absolute. The young king, torn between conscience and maternal persuasion, ultimately sanctioned the bloodshed. Catherine, observing from the shadows, ensured that fear replaced dissent and that survival meant submission to her will. In the aftermath, Catherine's reputation took on mythic proportions. She became the embodiment of both cunning and cruelty, a woman whose intellect was matched only by the fear she inspired. Ambassadors from across Europe wrote of her influence, of the subtle but deadly ways in which she shaped policy, intrigue, and the fate of nations. Yet even as whispers of poison and conspiracy grew louder, Catherine continued to cultivate the public image of a cultured, gracious queen, the patron of arts, music, and spectacle. Her genius lay in the duality of her persona, the elegance that dazzled and the ruthlessness that struck unseen. As the decades progressed, Catherine's power was tested repeatedly. The wars of religion continued to ravage France, and her sons, Francis II, Charles IX, and Henry III, were ill-equipped to navigate the treacherous political waters. Francis II had died young, leaving the crown to Charles IX, who, despite his youth, carried the weight of his mother's expectations and the consequences of her decisions. Catherine acted as regent, advisor, and often executioner in all but name, her influence extending into the very marrow of the monarchy. She understood that her authority was both her shield and her weapon, and she wielded it with careful deliberation. Catherine's engagement in espionage and the art of poison reached new heights during this period. The Queen Mother employed a network of spies, informants, and apothecaries, each playing a role in a system designed to maintain her dominance. Rumors abounded that she possessed secret recipes capable of ending lives invisibly, that she kept a codex of poisons cataloged with meticulous care, and that she had the capacity to eliminate anyone who posed a threat, noble, advisor, or foreign emissary alike. Whether or not Catherine personally administered these substances, the perception of her mastery over death reinforced the fear that surrounded her, ensuring obedience and caution from all who moved within her orbit. Her relationships with her children were no less complex. Charles IX, increasingly unstable and troubled by guilt, became a pawn in his mother's elaborate strategies. Catherine guided him through political crises, marriages, and treaties, shaping his decisions with subtle coercion. Henry III, initially distant and independent, was gradually drawn under her influence, subjected to her counsel, her manipulations, and, when necessary, her veiled threats. Catherine's maternal devotion was inseparable from her political ambition. The two were entwined in a way that made her both a protective mother and a ruthless architect of power. The Queen's manipulation extended beyond family to the courts and nobility. She brokered alliances between warring factions only to dismantle them when they no longer served her purposes. She cultivated rivalries and exploited divisions, ensuring that no single power block could challenge her supremacy. Every banquet, every masked ball, every public ceremony was a stage upon which she performed, observed, and controlled. The court became a theater of fear, intrigue, and spectacle, with Catherine at the center, orchestrating events with a precision that rivaled the greatest military generals. Catherine's influence even reached the international stage. She corresponded with foreign rulers, negotiated marriages, and engaged in diplomacy that required equal parts charm and intimidation. The Italian courts, the Spanish monarchy, and the papacy all recognized her skill in navigating treacherous political waters. She could charm ambassadors with grace, manipulate allies with subtlety, and intimidate enemies with the suggestion of death. Catherine's legacy was not merely domestic, it was continental, a testament to a mind that understood the delicate balance between power and perception. Despite her formidable intelligence and political acumen, Catherine was not invincible. The court remained a dangerous place, full of jealous nobles, ambitious advisors, and rivals who coveted the crown. Assassination attempts, plots of rebellion, and schemes of betrayal were constant threats. Catherine countered these dangers with strategy, cunning, and occasionally ruthless violence. She maintained control through a combination of fear, loyalty, and the careful calibration of reward and punishment. Her survival, and the survival of her family's reign, depended on her ability to anticipate every move and manipulate every situation to her advantage. Catherine's cultural contributions, while often overshadowed by her reputation for cruelty, were significant. She fostered the arts, encouraged innovation, and sponsored architectural projects that would endure for centuries. Her patronage of painters, poets, and musicians was not merely indulgence, it was part of her strategy to maintain influence, impress allies, and distract her enemies. She understood that perception could be as powerful as force, and she crafted an image of sophistication and refinement that masked the darker mechanisms of her control. As she aged, Catherine's health began to fail. Chronic illness, the strain of repeated pregnancies, and the relentless stress of governance took their toll. Yet, even as her body weakened, her mind remained sharp, her strategies as intricate as ever. She continued to intervene in political matters, guide her sons, and manage the delicate balance of power within France. Her legacy was cemented not through sheer force, but through an unparalleled understanding of human nature, the ability to manipulate, intimidate, and inspire fear in equal measure. The final years of Catherine de' Medici's life were marked by reflection and the management of her enduring influence. Her children, now fully grown, navigated the consequences of her decisions. The monarchy faced continued challenges, but Catherine's shadow remained over every aspect of governance. She had shaped the court, the country, and even the perception of monarchy itself. Her life was a testament to the intricate interplay of power, fear, and strategy. A life in which elegance masked ruthlessness and motherhood intertwined with political ambition in ways that would shape history forever. Catherine died in 1589, a figure of immense power and controversy. Her funeral was attended by nobles, courtiers, and foreign dignitaries who recognized both her influence and her infamy. France, though still fractured, had been held together by her relentless hand, and her legacy was etched into the annals of history as both cautionary tale and admiration for intellect, strategy, and endurance. The queen, who had navigated treachery, betrayal, and war, had left a mark that would never fade. Her death did not end the stories of poison, intrigue, and fear. Tales of secret vials, hidden plots, and sudden deaths continued to circulate, entwined with her memory. Catherine de' Medici became a legend, the archetype of a queen whose intelligence, ruthlessness, and determination shaped an entire nation. Scholars, writers, and artists would long debate the extent of her cruelty, the morality of her actions, and the brilliance of her strategies. Yet all agreed on one undeniable truth. Catherine de' Medici had mastered the art of power in a world where weakness meant death. Even in death, her presence lingered in the court she had commanded, in the policies she had shaped, and in the culture she had influenced. France remembered Catherine not merely as a queen, but as an enduring symbol of the dark interplay between ambition, strategy, and survival. Her life illustrated the terrifying potency of intellect coupled with fear, a combination that few could challenge and even fewer could comprehend fully. The final chapter of her story is not one of gentle fading or quiet repose. It is a story of enduring influence, of shadows cast long after her physical presence had vanished. Catherine de' Medici's legacy survived in the decisions of her children, the policies of the crown, and the whispered warnings in the corridors of the Louvre. Her life remained a masterclass in strategy, a narrative of power entwined with terror and an indelible testament to the lengths a determined mind could go to protect and preserve authority. In the end, Catherine de' Medici's dark history is more than a chronicle of poison and plots. It is the story of a woman who understood the fragility of life, the volatility of loyalty, and the inexorable pull of ambition. She turned fear into influence, manipulation into survival, and intellect into a weapon more formidable than any army. Her name endures as both cautionary legend and marvel of political mastery, a queen whose life continues to captivate, terrify, and inspire reflection on the true nature of power. And so, the tale of Catherine de' Medici closes not with silence, but with a lingering echo of her presence in history, a shadow that moves through time, reminding all who hear it that in the corridors of power, intelligence, patience, and ruthlessness are the most potent of all forces, and that the Black Queen of France will forever reign in the dark corners of memory, her story whispered in awe and dread alike.